Okay. Well, wanted to do a video recording for some of our senior parents who are helping their child make this transition from high school to college. Just a couple weeks ago, I was in Mr. Murkowski's religion classes with all the seniors and just kind of shared some basic information on how they can be successful in college, some of the differences they might encounter between the high school world and the college world, high school teachers versus college professors. We kind of went over some major checklist items of things they should be looking into, tasks that need to be completed before move-in day in the fall and just kind of generally helping them understand the importance of the next couple months because it can be a difficult time for a student. I think any transition period for any of us throughout life can always be a bit difficult to navigate. So, I wanted to share some information with you all today to kind of help you as you make this transition with your child and to further assist them once they are done here at Providence, they've graduated. Because, like I said, the next couple of months tend to be pretty important. So, wanted to share some of this information with you all. As I mentioned, for our students, this can be a weird kind of flux period because they're no longer a high school student, but they're not quite yet an actual college student. So they're kind of in this gray area. And like I said, for some students, this can be a difficult period of time. They're not really sure where they stand exactly. Um, so, like I said, being able to assist your child and kind of walk them through this process, I think is really important. So, what is on your seniors' minds? Well, it's hard to say, of course. Every single day is different. Um, so, there might be some of these questions they might be asking themselves. And, some of this I pick up from when I'm in the classrooms with the students. You might be seeing it at home as well. But yeah, some of these questions might be, will I be able to do the work? I talk to students about the thing called imposter syndrome. We sometimes will show up on a college campus, look around the room and think that, do I really belong here? Are these people a lot smarter than I am? Can I actually do this work? I've heard my whole life that college is so much more difficult than high school. So I might be asking myself, am I ready for this challenge? The social aspect also tends to be extremely important for our seniors. They might be asking about, will I make any friends? Especially if they're going to a school that no other Providence student is headed to. That can be difficult to go into a new environment coming out of kind of a small environment had here at Providence, and maybe they went to, deanery school with some of their friends, and so they've been together for 12 plus years, and now they're having to go out alone into this new environment. And so, yeah, the social aspect to me can be very difficult. Obviously, the living arrangement can be a major shift for students, and we kind of talked about that. And I think whether you have a random roommate you've never met before, or if you're actually rooming with a best friend, still there's some growing pains there. Sharing a small space in that environment with someone else, there's going to be some friction at times. So there's always some questions about the rooming situation. Financially speaking, we're always kind of asking this question, will I be able to afford this education? And hopefully at this point, before a student, before you all made that final decision, you kind of looked over the financial aid letter and to make sense of that and to see, is this truly something that's affordable for us? But even still, I know some students make those decisions and they're still not 100% sure how they're going to be able to afford. Maybe they have year one covered, but then years two, three, and four look a little bit fuzzy. So yeah, the affordability question is always going to be in the mind of students. Who will I be at college? I talked about, this is a great time if they're not happy with maybe the way senior year went or last couple of years have went, it's really a great opportunity to redefine themselves. So they might be asking themselves, who do I want to be in this new phase of life? How do I want to present myself? Going back to the social stuff, friendships, with everyone going in different directions, how am I going to maintain these friendships I've cultivated over the past 12 plus years. And as I tell students, those relationships are going to look different. It doesn't mean they have to end, but definitely they're going to have to look a little bit different. Both parties are going to have to make an extra effort to keep in touch and also just be okay with the fact that, yeah, you're not going to be talking to this person every single day, all day. And that's okay, for things to look different, as long as each side is giving the other some grace in that. But yeah, that can be difficult. Obviously, we have students um, in relationships with one another here. And so boyfriend's going to this school over here, girlfriend's going to that school, kind of the uncertainty of what will happen to those relationships can be difficult for a senior to think about. And lastly, did I make the right choice? I think that's another question we always ask ourselves throughout life with any big decision. Did I make the right choice? And we can kind of get stuck in that cycle of discernment over and over again and over analyzing it. But at the end of the day, we all have to make a choice and trust that we made the right one. But yeah, students might be asking themselves some of these questions. And like I said, that can really weigh heavy on them. So just being cognizant of that and understanding that while you're having some difficulties during this transition period, your senior definitely is as well. So, some questions worth asking during this transition period. Once again, the first one I've asked our students time and time again. Maybe I've shared this question with you, but what is the purpose? What's the why? Why are we going to college? And if a student has not asked themselves that question honestly at this point, let's revisit that and let's kind of sort out what's my rationale for going to college. And everyone has different reasons. Some might be better than others, but if a student and you as a family have not asked that question, like what's the purpose? What are their goals? What are we aiming to achieve? Now would be a good time to ask that. I asked the seniors this a couple weeks ago. I kind of asked them, at this point, what are you most excited about? What are you most worried about? What are your concerns? And we kind of sorted through some of that. Goals for first semester. I explained to students that it's always advantageous to have some goals in mind. So maybe start playing out what's a goal I have for first semester. And that could be academically related, like being on the dean's list, could be socially related, um, making friendships or getting involved in a certain club or activity, Greek life, whatever it might be. But always having goals, is a good thing. How does your child plan to deal with the stress and anxiety that they will undoubtedly encounter at college? We've been talking this past year about the importance of kind of handing over some responsibilities to these students because, yeah, they're going to be all alone here in a few short months. So they're not going to have the same support that they've always had. There's obviously lots of support and resources on campus, but they're going to have to seek that out. And that becomes one of the major differences with college is students really have to advocate for themselves. So start kind of playing out how are you going to deal with these challenges that you're definitely going to face sometimes right away early on. And also as a parent, you might want to ask, what role do you want me to play? We all have different roles to play once a child goes to college, and those roles are going to have to look different than they have the past 4 years. So kind of understanding, giving your child the option to kind of explain, how involved do you want me to be? Do you want me to be pretty much hands off? Those are some other questions to kind of ask. So I told students, I had a list of top 10 ways to be successful in college. It's all just based on me personally from my experiences working in college admissions, working in higher education as a teacher, a coach, a high school counselor, and just obviously, from being a previous college student myself, so this is a very unscientific, unofficial list, but I kind of went through these with students. And we started with number one, obviously, know your goals and values. And I kind of put it purposely there on number one, because once again, I think it's important for students to know kind of their purpose and what their goals are for college. And also, what are your values? What things are important to you? What things do you hold dear? Because if students haven't, seriously thought about the things that are important to them and where they stand on really important issues, at this point, like they need to think about that rather than being faced. with a difficult decision once you get to college. And we talked about, underage drinking, drug usage, premarital sex, all those things. What is your stance on that? We obviously know what the Catholic Church has taught. They've had this, if they've been in Catholic schools for a long time, we know what the church's teachings are and what's best for students, but they have to, at the end of the day, make that decision themselves. Unfortunately, we're not always going to be there to steer them in the right direction. So they have to make that decision for themselves. So knowing what their goals and values are, first and foremost, I think is very important. Learning basic day-to-day skills, whether that's cooking food, doing laundry, know how to change a tire if they get a flat on the way to campus, on the way home. Stay organized. I kind of talked about, the college landscape is less forgiving as far as those, assignments and when things are due and knowing what you have going on that day, that week, that month. They really have to be on top of it. We also really stress getting involved. Homesickness is a part of almost everyone's experience when they first get to college. And so getting involved is going to make that transition period a little bit easier. And it's going to make the overall college experience that much more fruitful. Rather than just going to class and then going back and hiding out in your dorm room, let's get involved and get, really put down some roots on campus. And I told them, that first weekend of college, you need to fight every urge, every instinct that tells you to come back home. You need to stay on campus, try to establish some relationships, and really immerse yourself in what that campus has to offer. It's going to make the whole experience 10 times better. Number five, establish a routine. So I kind of talked about the day to day, might look a lot different than it does in high school, where it's pretty much prescribed 8:30 to 3 o'clock every single day. You can kind of expect the same type of thing. But college, you might have one class on one day, you might have three or four the next day. There might be days where you have no classes. So establishing a routine of getting up this around the same time, eating your meals around the same time, studies show that that's really great for us physically, but also mentally as well. Number six, I had to say it, go to class. You know, you guys are paying good money for this experience. Um, even if the class is 100, 200 people in the class and no one's going to notice that you're gone, it's still really important that you go to class, tune in, try to get as much out of it as you can. And also attend office hours. We kind of talked about what those were and how we could kind of correlate that with our current Blue Days we have in high school. It's kind of the college equivalency and how important it is, once again, to seek out additional help, advocate for yourself when you need it. Number seven, I talked about the 1 to 3 rule, which is the ratio. Kind of the old wise tale is that, for every hour you spend on campus, sorry, in the classroom, for every hour you're, pretty much sitting there in class, you need to be spending around 3 hours outside of class, reviewing notes, working on assignments, doing the readings, just to kind of illustrate how important it is to use your time wisely outside of class, because the physical time you're actually spending in the classroom, in the lecture hall, in the lab is actually pretty minimal. There's going to be a lot of downtime. So, how are you going to spend that downtime? And of course, for every class, you're not going to have to use this 1 to 3 rule. But for some classes, for sure, if you're taking organic chem, that's definitely going to take a good amount of time preparing for that class, reviewing notes, working on assignments, all that stuff. Um, Number eight, don't ignore your health. And we talked about the physical health, but also the mental health aspect. Number nine, the importance of getting an internship, getting really solid career experience, maybe linking up with a mentor. Maybe that's an alumnus. Every campus, well, most campuses for that matter, have some connections you can make, some programs to help you get connected to some alumni that can help you on your way. And obviously, all those things look good on a resume. Um, so that's really important for students. And some of those internships, as you all know, can sometimes turn into full-time job offers even before a student graduates from college. And number 10, just in general, use your on-campus resources, whether, that's the counseling center, if you're going through a tough time, you need to talk to a therapist. They have those on campus. If you want to work out, every campus has a fitness center that you're entitled to. If you need tutoring services, if you need to go to the writing center to help you academically have that support, all that's great. If you want career service opportunities, they can help you work on your resume, do mock interviews, things like that. There's just so many resources on campus that are part of the tuition and fees that you're paying for that you are entitled to. So, just wanted to remind students about the importance of using those resources that they are indeed paying for somewhere in that bill. So once again, those are just kind of 10 things I pointed out to students. It's, nothing official, but thought maybe some of those might be helpful to students as they make this transition. So a checklist. I went through the freshman year checklist with students. We didn't go over everything, and I certainly won't do that with you either today. But I talked about the first one, paying your enrollment deposit. That's typically the way in which a student commits to a school, and typically that's done before May 1st, which is the decision deadline. Based on the show of hands, it looked like 90% of seniors have already made up their minds and made that deposit. Other students are still, working through some of those decisions. Um, so usually it's a $200 or $300 deposit. Sometimes signing up for orientation and paying the orientation fee is the way in which you make your commitment. So every school is a little bit different. Secondly, though, I mentioned the importance of letting your other schools know. So all those other schools you applied to back in the fall, and that you were accepted into, did you inform them that you've made your final decision that you'll be going to this other school? Because if not, you might want to do that because they're going to keep calling, texting, emailing until they hear otherwise. In students' portals, they'll need to accept or decline financial aid. If a student is taking out a loan, there's a master promissory note application they'll have to complete. Housing applications, a lot of students have been working on those for a while now. Orientation, I told students, even if it seems like it's just kind of an optional thing, please go ahead and do it. There's some really important things that take place during orientations. And it's not just like the social aspect of meeting the other incoming students in the class, but also really important things like putting your fall semester schedule together. Some students are taking placement tests, especially at like U of L. I know Louisville has students, if they were test optional, they do an AccuPlacer to put them in the appropriate foreign language or math or English courses. I reminded students how important it is to be checking their college email because colleges will now start to kind of filter all of those important emails to the college email rather than the personal email they used when they were applying back in the fall. They're now going to be sending everything to that college email. So for sure, students need to be checking that on a regular basis and not waiting until August to do that. We talked about vaccinations. Every school has a different policy on which vaccines they would like. Of course, there's always kind of opt-out forms as well. So be sure to check on that. Some of the biggest things we talked about on this list had to do with transcripts. So for sure, every college is going to need a final high school transcript sent to them before a student can start taking courses in the fall. So students will make one last request in Parchment. If they don't make that request, it's fine. Like I know pretty much which school every student is going to, and I'll make that request on their behalf. I just don't obviously want to do it for all 96 graduates. So if students can go into Parchment and make that request, that would be great. And then here's another big one. A lot of our students have taken college credit courses while they're at Providence, whether that's through IU, through like an ACP class, or if they took it through Ivy Tech. Some people took like the Ball State computer science class. It's really important that students make those official requests because even if it says Ivy Tech or IU on our high school transcript next to a class, colleges will not count that as official. They need a student to go in and request those Ivy Tech or IU transcripts. Um, in the timing in which they do this might be different for every student. So, for example, if a student right now is taking business or sociology through Ivy Tech, they need to wait until that final grade has been recorded before they make that request. Otherwise, they're going to have to pay another $5 once those grades are in, because at this point, if they make a request, it's just going to say in progress for those courses, and it's kind of a waste of $5. Same thing with IU. If a student is taking ACP Spanish or ACP Finite right now, they need to wait until those grades have been recorded before they make that request for the IU transcript. AP scores. Once again, a lot of our students might have college credit through advanced placement courses. If they got a 3, 4, or 5 on those exams in the past, it's important for them to go into their College Board account, and they can do this now. For every student who's currently taken an AP class, and then will be taking AP exams here in the next week or so, they can go into the College Board account today and designate one college to receive their AP score report for free. They need to do that before June 20th. So they go in and designate that one college, and that at that point in July, they will send all these incoming AP scores from this testing cycle getting ready to start up next week, and all historical AP scores as well. So that's something a student could do today. So we want to make sure that students are aware of that. So like I said, the high school transcript, the college transcripts, the AP score report, all those things are extremely important. I will be allowing graduates to come in after graduation to come meet with me in my office if they want assistance uh, to make all these requests and make sure that that's taken care of, because the last thing I want to see or hear about is that a senior who had all these college credits failed to send in those college transcripts, those AP scores, and now they're taking the same classes again in college. This time, though, they're much harder and much more expensive because they were all free credits they took in high school. So, that's one of my worst fears. So, in order to assist with that, like I said, I allow graduates to come back in, meet with me, and we can sit down and knock all these things out. Last year, I had over 30 graduates who came in after graduation day to get some extra help. So, I know it's a little bit tricky. Every college is different on the process, but your student was given a little slip of paper that had links on where they should go to initiate all these requests. But once again, if they have questions, they should just reach out to me. Let's see, outside scholarships. If a student has any outside scholarships they've earned, you definitely want to report that to the financial aid office at their college, just because it could change things slightly in their financial aid letter. Um, just contacting, communicating with your roommate about packing lists, what you need. Obviously, we don't need students bringing 2 TVs and 2 fridges and all that, because some of those rooms are pretty small, as you guys saw during those campus tours. So make sure they're communicating that. Let's see. We talked about, um, most of our students are not going to a Catholic college or university, but I stress to them that that doesn't mean they can't continue to grow in their faith. And in fact, a lot of public, secular schools do have a lot of opportunities for students to get involved on campus. There's Newman Centers at most public schools like IU and UK, places like that, where they can go and actually worship, meet other people. All that stuff. But regardless of where a student is at, they typically can find a Catholic church nearby. So there's definitely ways for students to grow in their faith, and we hope that they continue to do that long after they leave Providence. Um, and I reminded them, just because you're in college, if you're Catholic, that doesn't mean that your Sunday obligation automatically goes away. You still need to find a way to get to Mass on Sundays. Textbooks. So we talked about kind of the differences between, purchasing versus renting. It depends if you're buying new versus used. Are you buying from the bookstore, which happens to be the most expensive in most cases, the bookstore on campus, or are you getting it from Amazon, from Chegg? Because yeah, you're typically going to allot about $1,000 to $1,500 per academic year on textbooks, but it largely depends on where you're buying it from and if you're getting new or used. So, just reminded students about that aspect. And usually there's estimates of what textbook costs will be on your financial aid letter. Skipping out a little bit here, if a student had accommodations, an individualized service plan here at Providence, that doesn't mean that those accommodations have to go away. They might look different, but a student will need to reach out to the Office of Disability Services on their campus, submit paperwork that's necessary in order to see what types of accommodations they might be eligible for. We just don't want students to say, well, I'm in college now, I don't need those things anymore. Like if you still need them, for sure, take advantage of that. Let's see, just things we don't typically think about, when going off to college. Like, for example, if a student has a prescription that they take each and every day, like getting that prescription transferred to a nearby pharmacy so the student can go pick that up. They don't have to make a trip home, or you don't have to send it in the mail every time they need to refill that prescription. Um, yeah, I mentioned to students getting involved on campus is really important, and they will typically have some type of student activities fair at the beginning of the year, so be sure to attend that. And for any of you that have a student going far away, making sure you book flights and, if you're staying over for the weekend, even reserving hotel rooms now. Because, yeah, some of these college towns just explode overnight in population, and you might find that, wow, I can't get a flight, or there's no hotel rooms for us, or even simple things like getting a restaurant reservation might be more difficult if you don't make those reservations now. So this is probably not a fully exhaustive list, but I thought there's some obvious things in here that students know about and maybe some less obvious things that they should look into as they make this transition. So, moving on here, just want to put a quick plug in for FERPA. So that's that federal law, which basically says, a student's academic, disciplinary records, any educational records, that is owned by the student themselves. So, for example, unless a student gives you explicit permission and fills out a form, you're not going to be able to call in October and check in on Johnny's grades or check in to see if, they're in good standing with the school. All of those records belong to the student. And I know that's frustrating because you, as a parent, typically is the one paying the bill. And so I've dealt with that before where parents say, I'm paying the money, like why can I not have access to this information? That's just the way it goes. So just be aware that FERPA law is in place. So once a student moves on to college, you're not able to check in on those things. Another good resource for college parents is the College Parent Central. I think I've given a plug for this website before, but they have just a ton of great articles. I will attach kind of a quick reading for you onto this email where I'm going to send out this recording for you guys to check in on. But they just have great resources there. I think it got started by two women, two moms that had students go off to college, and they thought, it would be really great if there was some type of resource out there for college parents that not only help them as they're going through this application and admissions process, but once their student is on campus to kind of help parents feel more informed, know how to navigate certain situations. So, a lot of great resources on College Parent Central. Another great resource that you could look into is this book. And so I bought this book for students sometimes, but it's called How to College. So what to know before you go and once you're there. So that can be a great option as well. You can find it on Amazon. Um, I highly endorse that as well. Just kind of wrap up here, just some end of the year events. There's a lot, as you know, it feels like every spring we kind of cram everything into like the final 4 to 6 weeks. So we have a lot going on. We just came off of prom weekend, which was a lot of fun. And yesterday was senior skip day, of course. There's assistance day on Thursday of this week. But May 1st, this Friday, is going to be an e-learning day as usual with Oaks Day. Those assignments will be due on Tuesday of the following week. AP exams, as I mentioned, get started up here soon. So they begin the week of May 4th and finish up the week of May 11th. Seniors are taking final exams in their core classes from May 7th through the 14th. May 14th in the evening at 7 p.m. in the main gym, we have the senior award ceremony, which is always really great to recognize all the achievements of our students. And if I haven't already mentioned this a million times, please, 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 if your student has been accepted to a college, if they have a scholarship from a college or a scholarship from a community-based organization or from your workplace, whatever it might be, please share that with us. We put all that into the senior awards program as well as the graduation program, and we can only record the information we were given. And we can't just have like a list of schools your child got into. We need to see documentation. So whether that's a screenshot or a copy, an email that you forward along, whatever it is, we want to make sure we have 100% accuracy. So please help us with that. So yeah, Senior Awards Night is a great way for us to celebrate our students' achievements. Um, a lot of those community-based organizations will come and present those scholarships, which is always going to be a surprise, really to all of us, to the students and to us. A lot of those awards we're not even sure who the winners are. So it's a really great ceremony. The next day on that Friday, we'll have graduation practice in the morning, and that evening is the baccalaureate mass, which I believe is at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And then May 17th, of course, we have graduation here at Providence, and our underclassmen wrap up their courses on May 27th. I think it might be a half day for final exams. So just some important events there to keep in mind. But as I mentioned, the biggest thing I need from all of you right now is to help us gather those acceptance letters and scholarship notifications just so we can put all of that in the programs. I swear every single year I get some upset parents and I understand, but so far, this is my fourth year at Providence. 100% of the time the situation was that we were never given the information to begin with. So we really push students to be the ones who are sharing this information, the documentation about their acceptances and scholarships with us. But we also live in reality, and we know that parents also are typically the ones that play a key role in that as well. So yeah, as I kind of wrap this up, please let me know if you all need any help over the next couple months. I think the coolest thing about being a Providence graduate is that we're always here to help them long after they've graduated. So if a student needs something down the road, or if you need something, never hesitate to reach out. But hopefully some of this information was helpful, whether you've been through this before or this is your first child going to college. Hopefully there is at least one or two pieces of information in this video that can be of help. But once again, please reach out. Don't hesitate if you need anything. Thank you guys.